To another episode of the Asset Mindset. Today on our podcast we have Hunter Gibson, and I've known Hunter for just a little bit, but he's just a young hustler, and we try to bring on this podcast a lot of young people who are just getting their hands dirty in real estate, and Hunter's doing a few different things here and there to make money in real estate. He's an investor, he's an agent, and we'll let him dive a little bit into a story. So Hunter, you didn't grow up in Utah. Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up actually on the East Coast, out a little bit north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Nice. And I believe that you came to Utah to do real estate. Is that right, or am I wrong?
Yeah, correct. I drove out here to become a real estate agent. I actually passed my test on the way out here, which was kind of crazy, so I could do this full time.
That's cool, man. And what got you interested in real estate? Did you go to school or just right out of high school jump into real estate?
I think it was ever since I was young, kind of growing up. I did have a family where there's a bunch of entrepreneurs, so business owners. I've seen some that were extremely successful while others were still kind of scraping to get by. And ever since I was little, my parents at the age of 14, I was literally door knocking to get my first customers when I had my landscaping business. And through that, I did a lot of just trying to almost become that financially free, or just kind of have money. Never really spent any of it. I just kind of had it to feel almost like more safe, and like most people probably say, to give you more options so you can choose what you want to do and where you want to spend your time doing. And through that, I kind of did a handful of different things. I was really into stocks for a while, but my uncle, who has been doing this for an extremely long period of time. He has a ton of properties. I saw how successful he was. And I think after reading a lot of books about tax strategy and tax savings, the loopholes that real estate provides isn't like another any asset class, which kind of wanted me to continue to go that route.
Yeah. Hunter, when I agree with you, but I'm curious when you say loopholes, which loopholes are you referring to? Which ones have you seen that you've been able to take advantage of, or that you're looking to take advantage of, or which loopholes are you, referring to that actually give you that leverage or power that you're talking about, that you're, excited to apply?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jordan. And to start off, I probably read over 20 books about, taxes and a whole bunch of different things that can help save you money. And I think the biggest thing is really for most people, they got to look at where they're spending their money. So what I do like every single week, you have to figure out how much money you have coming in versus how much you have coming out. And two of my biggest expenses for almost everyone they don't realize is taxes. So everyone pays taxes from their current job. So what I decided to do is become a real estate professional. So as I am a realtor, I can actually write off my income from my property. So if I depreciate some properties, I don't have to pay taxes on the amount that I make from my current job. Where most people, such as like NFL players, doctors, they're paying, half of that to taxes. So if you look at taxes, are kind of the biggest expense, and then the second one is mostly living. So I feel like if you can kind of narrow those down, you'd be better off financially. Some of the other really big ones I think a lot of people don't know is, one, when you're living in the property, if you do sell it in, down the road, if you're single, you have $250,000, or if you're married, $500,000, you don't pay in capital gains if you've lived there for 2 out of the last 5 years. It's crazy the amount of people that don't know that when they're trying to sell their home, and find out about that. Another really big one is, cost seg. So when you're depreciating a property over 27 and a half years, or you kind of segment that down for an accelerated depreciation, which if you don't know what that is, you depreciate more within that first year. On top of that, you can write off a bunch of different things such as travel, meals. Even the biggest one that most people don't know is refinancing. So when you actually refinance a home or any property that you have multifamily unit, and let's say you pull out an additional $100,000-$200,000, you actually don't pay a single dollar in taxes because it's a loan against your asset. Just like most successful people, they're not paying any taxes on that. So what a lot of people do is, if you can honestly buy properties, you could 1031 exchange them, so you're deferring the taxes. And then once you build up enough equity, you could, essence, have a free and clear property, but then you could refinance it, pull out, $100,000 or $500,000, and you don't have to pay any taxes, and then you have your tenants paying for that mortgage, so your essence making 100% of that money.
Yeah, no, that's awesome,
Yeah,
man. Go ahead, Ben.
I was just gonna say, I'm glad you're talking about kind of all these tax strategies, because I remember Robert Kiyosaki saying that the number one barrier to getting wealthy is taxes. And so like a lot of his books, and I'm sure you've read a lot of his books, are kind of centered on like tax strategies and how to mitigate your tax risk. And I think a lot of people, at least of what I've seen, they don't really consider that a reason to get into real estate. It's only like the people who make a ton of money, who like need to park their money, are considering that a reason to get into real estate. But I just thought it's interesting you bring that up, as one of the reasons that you're kind of jumping full time into real estate, because it is the smart thing to do, especially in the long run, to mitigate your tax liability.
I think even
And that was actually one of the
Kiyosaki was talking about in his book as well that, I heard him on a podcast where he says, Rich Dad Poor Dad is really not even a real estate book, but so often a lot of real estate investors refer to it as a real estate book, but in reality, it's really not, right? And it's just one of those asset classes that allow you to take advantage of the tax situation. You said something a little earlier, Hunter, that you actually said a lot of good things right there that I kind of wanted to dissect. The first one was, the statement of being a real estate professional, right? And so I think a lot of people don't understand that those taxes, they come based on your status with the IRS, like you mentioned previously, right? And I know I was guilty of that. Like I was a victim. I went and bought a quadruplex, and I called my accountant, and I was like, hey man, I want to accelerate this property against my income this year, and he's like, yeah, it doesn't work that way. And so I wanted you to kind of speak to a little bit more about that specifically, so one, people understand what that means, and then we can kind of dive into some more of those tax things. But I think it's super important to understand the difference between like a real estate professional and just like somebody who buys real estate, because I didn't realize that was like there was an actual discrepancy there. I thought it was just like, oh yeah, I'm a real estate professional, like I've got 4 units, or I've got 8 units, I've got 16 units. But really it's a status, right? So can you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, correct. So from my understanding, it can depend on 2 different things. So one, if you are, or your job is pretty much based around real estate full time. So as a real estate agent, that's what I do day in, day out, and it's on and around real estate. Same thing if you're a lender. I think even if you own like 5% of a brokerage, you can actually be classified as a real estate professional. And then on top of that, if you do have a 9-to-5, you can still be classified as a real estate professional. You just need a certain amount of hours in the industry. And it comes out to being about like 14 or 15 hours a week, I believe. I'm not 100% on that, but that would classify you into that real estate professional class as the IRS would see it in their eyes, which would allow you to, write off of that income based off of if you were going to depreciation of the asset.
Yeah, because there's different benefits, right, between being a real estate professional and then just being one who buys real estate. Like even if you buy real estate, like you can still write off the depreciation, but you can't accelerate it. Or you can still take advantage of certain write-offs, but being a professional, you're able to do a lot more that leverages you towards wealth versus just the everyday person who's trying to buy real estate. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Awesome, man. My next question for you is, you're kind of like an investor agent. You have bought in properties, and then you also do a little bit with pre-foreclosures, and then you're also an agent selling houses, doing that here and there. So my question is just like, how do you balance the two, and like what's your focus moving forward? Are you trying to like sell as many houses as you can, or are you wanting to buy as many properties as you can, or just use the both to supplement each other? Or what's that like for you?
I mean, it's definitely difficult, and I feel like for anyone to really balance what you are doing. For me, I mean, I put everything into my calendar. So, I mean, day in, day out, I know what I'm doing the following day. I mean, even before I go to bed, that's kind of the last thing I'll do is make a list of the 3 most important things that I want to accomplish for that day. I mean, I do base around everything, I would say, with trying to make more money right now so I can buy more properties or put more money in even the project that I have right now. So throughout the day, I'm mostly, working as a realtor, trying to sell more houses or get more clients so I can make a little bit more money. But I mean, on top of that, ultimately the end goal would be to buy more properties so that you can have a more passive lifestyle and not really have to worry about waking up and, making that extra sale the next month or, a year from now.
Cool, man.
Right.
And so how are you finding these leads? Like, I know you've talked a little bit about your lead generation source, but if you could dive into that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. And are you talking about leads for investment side or for me as a realtor?
For both. I'm curious. Both. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So to start off, myself as a realtor, I'm getting a lot of leads from the team that I'm on. As a younger realtor in the area, joining a team I think was something that was beneficial to learn a lot extremely quickly in a short period of time. So through that, I mean, they probably give me, I would say, maybe about 15 to 20 leads a day, which is honestly a lot. And then on top of that, I mean, calling, for sale by owners in the area or expireds, and same thing with door knocking and kind of working that area. I mean, there's a handful of different things. They even have this software where you can pretty much pull any neighborhood and just do circle calls or call around. If you have an open house or just sold a house, or you have a client that just bought it. I mean, there's so many things that you can do, and I feel like you don't always know that getting into kind of the industry. And then for myself is, somebody that's looking for an investment property. I mean, there's always on the market, which is always pretty common for most people to look at. If you go off the market, that would be, for me, looking at anyone that is one, you could talk to like wholesalers, so people looking at deals that way, which I do look at. And then on top is like door knocking or looking at pre-foreclosures, and even through just working your network. So when I was at school, I mean, I lived in a few landlord houses, and I was figuring out how much money they were making. And I don't think I even realized that the home prices actually weren't that significant. So kind of going back through there, and where I went to school at University of Dayton, there is about like 90% the school owns, and 10% are landlord. And that's kind of where everyone lives, is in this select neighborhood. So we're actually been going back through there and kind of networking through the landlords, because one landlord, they know them all. So literally going through there, and I mean, me and one of my good friends have a pretty good list, and we're just kind of reaching back out and kind of touching them every month or 2 months or 3 months. And then that's the same thing as a realtor. I have like a CRM, so something that updates me to kind of reach back out, or I'll put in like a Google Calendar or Google Sheets to kind of follow up, because I think follow up is kind of the more important aspect rather than the first touch point or even finding the lead.
Sure. So, Hunter, I'm kind of curious. Last year we had a big surge of people buying homes, right? Actually, last probably year and a half. There's just this huge surge of people like buying homes, and then all of a sudden we had this big like smack in the face of reality where interest rates just popped off. And I'm curious, so compared to last year to now, how has that impacted your business as a realtor, right? Number one. And then number two, what things are you doing, if it has impacted, to kind of stay like on your game and still keep like finding good quality leads, keeping your business, right? Because as a realtor, like, I mean, yeah, you may work for a company, but you really are your own business, right? To some extent. And so those are like the two questions I have. Is one, like, what are you seeing right now as far as like how the fluctuation has been from last year to this year, and what would your advice be for anybody in that matter? And then two, like, what are you doing as a realtor to set yourself apart and like make sure that you're keeping your business intact?
Yeah, I mean, there has been a significant impact with the increase in interest rates. And for most people that don't know, every time an interest rate goes up 1%, you actually as a buyer lose about 10% of your buying power. So if when rates went from 2.5%, 3% all the way up to now we're mid to high sixes to maybe even low sevens, depending on what you're buying and your credit as well. I mean, home prices last year dropped almost 40%. They
Wow.
were about the lowest even before 2015 in a single year, which definitely hurts somebody that makes money off of a transaction of buying and selling. So when you see something like that, I mean, you definitely need to pivot. I think the biggest thing is you just have to reach out to more people. If you were talking to 20 people in order to buy a home, now it may be 40 or it might be 60. So you're going to have to spend a lot more time like prospecting and really trying to find people that are a little bit more motivated, because maybe some people that would like to move aren't really going to move because it's a lot more expensive now. So you got to find people that maybe need to move because their family's a lot bigger and they can't stand where they're at, or they're moving because of work or a divorce situation. So there are people still buying and selling. It's just not as many in the past, and especially when interest rates, I would say last year, went up, there was a lot more people that were like saying, oh, I'm gonna wait. And I think now more towards the summer, when obviously home prices do increase in the summertime, you get a lot more people moving with the nicer weather and when their kids are generally out of school. You have more people, I think, reality set in where they know interest rates are here. It's kind of more of a normal thing, where people back then, I think, were a little bit more panicked. And that's all just because based off the reality of where they were looking at, where interest rates were at 2.5% or 3% the year before the previous year. Because still at a 30-year average, the average interest rate's at 7%. So it's not significantly much higher. People are just comparing it to, a year or 2 years ago, which is what is difficult because that was extremely abnormal. Where this is kind of, I would say, maybe more reality. Who knows if we'll ever get to interest rates at 2.5% again. But I would love to see it.
Yeah, I bet you would. Yeah. I know I would.
Hey, I wanted to touch a little bit on just like investors reaching out to you, because I was actually talking with a buddy yesterday, and he was like, yeah, dude, realtors, they just get hit up by loan officers, by title companies, by investors, by inspection home companies, by like everybody just wanting to do business with them. Is that true? I mean, do you get like 1 million phone calls a day for people trying to sell you stuff?
I wouldn't say I get 1 million phone calls a day, but I do have a lot of people that are, trying to reach out and build that connection with you. I mean, I have title companies who will reach out and be like, let me buy you lunch again. Same thing with, loan officers and other people along those lines, as maybe investors as well. I don't think it's as frequent as most people think. I mean, maybe you get 1 or 2 people a day reaching out. And obviously it depends on how many transactions you're doing as well, and who you are using. I think on top of that too, with just working with investors, you just have to kind of really just keep on top of them. So if you're an investor and you want to work with agents, maybe reach out to them once a month, shoot them a text, or give them an email and just kind of follow up with them. Be like, hey, if you have any properties that, have a plot that you can subdivide, I would really love if you sent it to me. And if you kind of do that every single month, as soon as he sees that property, he's going to send it to you. But if you talk to him once and, you expect him to remember you 6 months later, it's probably not going to happen. So just for anything, I definitely think it is important to kind of do that follow-up more than the initial connection. Because most of the time they're not going to find something that you're looking for right now, but they could potentially find it 6 months from now, or maybe it's a year from now. And that's why I definitely think follow-up is kind of king.
Yeah, and so like I follow Keegley and Astroblasting a little bit, and I know that their model, like I know someone who works for Keegley, and he basically just cold calls 50 agents a day, and that's all he does. And wholesaling, he's been able to do, like I know he's had multiple months doing over 6 figures wholesaling, which is pretty incredible. But like if an investor reached out to you to try to work with you, I mean, how does that conversation go, and what are you looking for in an investor to work with?
Yeah, I mean, it can go usually one or two ways. I have some investors that will end up working with me solely, and they'll be willing to sign like a BBA, or pretty much that they would only work with me if I find them deals. Where obviously when somebody has that signed, we're going to spend a lot more time trying to find them a property rather than somebody else that's kind of reaching out to multiple different agents. But the people that are even reaching out and talking to multiple different agents and really trying to find a good deal, and one that kind of comes to them rather than working with an individual person, as long as they kind of still keep in contact with me, and same thing with I find them properties and send them stuff, if they're giving me feedback, I think they're staying at the top of mind, and kind of you're solidifying and building that relationship, or if you take them out to lunch or something along those lines. And I think the people that are, you're talking to more frequently and communicating with more, you're just going to be more at top of mind for them. So when something really good does pop up, it's going to be going your way, regardless if you have, signed paperwork or not.
Is there something specific that you look for, Hunter, whenever like somebody reaches out and says like, "Hey, I'm an investor," to help you like filter out like, okay, are you really an investor? Or like, you know what I mean? Like, do you have any like, anything that you use or do to like kind of filter out like, hey, is this person going to be worth my time? Or, hey, like this person I really should give some attention to?
Yeah, what we call it actually is LP Mama, so it's location, price, motivation, agent, and then mortgage. So you got to kind of build rapport with them and figure out what they're looking for, how motivated they are. And the more you talk to them, the more you'll realize where maybe this is their first investment property, or maybe they own 4 or 5 in the area. While you're talking, most people will kind of tell you depending on the questions that you ask. And a lot of times people that do say they're investors, if they're first time investors, they're going to be asking and trying to look for something that's just not there. So like here in Utah, we have, the average home price is around $600,000. So some people, they'll see a lot of times on maybe podcasts or YouTube videos where they're like, I want to find a quadplex that I can do FHA 3.5% down. Where if most people don't know, you cannot really find that here, because you need the rents to pretty much, be around what the mortgage insurance is with vacancy rates, which you're just not able to find here, especially an on-market property. I mean, maybe an off-market property. So when you have somebody asking something like that, or when people don't understand what the down payment that they need or other things like that, you can kind of get a feel for their knowledge. And obviously somebody that's more knowledgeable, has more experience, and would own more properties than somebody that's getting into it. And I think that's just like anything, when you do something from a first-hand experience, you're going to be a lot more knowledgeable than somebody that's been sitting there reading books for 10 years. So at some point you can kind of get a grasp of what they're looking for, and I think it starts with price, and then depending on their certain criteria, they might have a cash on cash return, maybe like a return on their investment, or a percent down they want. I mean, it completely depends. I think every single investor has a different criteria, so you really got to figure out what their criteria is and how you can kind of help them, because a good deal to me may not be a good deal to you guys as well.
And I think the reason why we're hounding on this so much is because that's like one of the strategies that Ben uses a lot. Like, I know that he does contact a lot of realtors, and he utilizes realtors to help him do a lot, look for his investment properties and whatnot. And so to me, it sounds like one of the things that you're looking for, Hunter, when somebody reaches out and says like, hey, I'm an investor, you want them to be very specific on, what was it, LP Mama, right? Like what they're looking for, where they're looking for it. Like, unless, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like somebody that just says like, hey, I'm an investor, man, I'm looking for off-market properties. Probably you're not going to give the same attention to as somebody that says, hey man, I'm looking like South Salt Lake. I want something that is going to be, within these parameters. I want to do it cash, or I want to do it, conventional, or I'm looking at like a 203K loan or something like that. Something getting more granular, you'll probably give more attention to. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I am even like on multiple, I would say like wholesalers lists. So like I'll get sent out deals all the time. that doesn't mean that's going to be a right fit for that person. So I could send them, 100 deals and they may not like a single one of them. So really figuring out what they're looking for can kind of help you. So you're, same time, I mean, as an investor, you guys value your time as much as I value my time. I don't want to send you everything under the sun and hope it's what you're looking for. So the more detail that you can get, I'm not going to reach out as frequently. And then when that property does pop up, I'm going to reach out to you. I mean, just off the top of my head, I know I was talking to somebody for a while where he was looking for, maybe like a single family home where he could subdivide the land. So he could divide it maybe 2 or 3 times and then sell that off to help pay for his single family home, which was pretty specific. So when you find something like that, it's like, okay, rather than most investors will say, I'm looking for a good deal or I'm looking for a unicorn, which, I mean, a good deal is different depending on who you're talking to and what situation they want. I mean, you might have a newer investor who wants a higher cash on cash return, or you might have somebody else who cares more about the equity standpoint, where he does, maybe a doctor, and he doesn't care if he makes money every single month. He could even lose money. He just wants a good house in a good area with a good tenant that's not going to bug him. So I think it honestly just depends on the investor and what they're trying to find.
Cool, man. Hunter, I gotta ask you, I've always kind of been curious about this, but if you have, say you find an off-market property, it's like super beat up, and you hit someone up, you're like, hey, you wanna buy this, you wanna submit an offer on it, and they submit an offer on it, and then they just go and assign it to someone else for like a 20 grand fee. Like, are you gonna be mad about that, or like, what are your thoughts around that, on people like wholesaling on top of your contract?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it hasn't happened to me yet, but if something like that happened, I wouldn't get angry at all. I mean, you had the agreement where you sold it to him. I think the problem where you're going to get some people frustrated is if you have certain deadlines in place in the contract or something happens and you have to keep extending them or something falls out. I think that's where you could get into a problem where it becomes a little bit more of a headache, where maybe it falls out of contract, or you have to push back financing, appraisal, or settlement 3 or 4 times for you to find a buyer. I think that's where you would come where there is more of a problem than if the whole transaction goes smoothly. I wouldn't have a problem with it at all. But again, that could depend on person to person. You might have somebody who sees and finds out that you made $20,000 and maybe they made $5,000, and then they get salty. I think that just depends on the person to person. So I couldn't really answer for anyone but myself.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of an interesting dynamic a little bit, because like I was telling you, I mean, I know wholesalers and that's all they do. Like, even with on-market properties, they just kind of negotiate low and then reassign it to a flipper for a fee, and they're just doing on-market properties with agents all day long. And obviously I don't think there's anything bad about that. It's just kind of a different strategy, and I've always wondered, like, kind of what goes through the realtor's head in that process, and sometimes if the realtor even knows that, like, that's what's going on.
Yeah, I don't think they'd really know until those deadlines keep getting pushed out. I mean, if it's pretty simple and smooth, I don't think they'd really have a problem, and they're probably not going to be asking too many questions. I know I have one wholesaler where that's literally all he started sending me, and I was like, are all your properties on market? And they were. Most of them, like 95% of them, were just on market properties where they kind of negotiated already a lower purchase price. So I do see that frequently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So kind of along the same lines as these like investor-agent relations, I kind of wanted to dive into your mindset a little bit about, we've kind of touched on like interest rates and how they're increasing, and everybody's got their own opinion on the market, right? Like, some people say it's gone up or down, or it's moving as normal or whatever. But what I was, my personal opinion is, I feel like I feel anyways, for me anyways, like I'm in a stalemate. Like, it's like, man, I can't find something and make it work with purchase price and interest rate right now, right? And so one of the things that I've been focusing a lot on, Hunter, is creative finance. And so I've been trying to figure out, how to negotiate these creative finance deals. And I'm curious, because my focus has been more like off-market, expired listing, pre-foreclosure, but I'm curious that if I'm missing a lot with on-market deals with realtors, and maybe I'm just not portraying it the right way to them. But I'm curious on your mindset of when somebody brings to you like, hey man, I want to buy this house, but I don't want to buy it traditionally. I want to do creative finance. Like, what things are you looking for? Have you had any experience with that yet? Or just what's your kind of mindset along those lines when an investor comes to you with a creative finance offer?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is things you are seeing, I would say, a significant amount more now than in the past, because interest rates, at the end of 2021 and beginning of 2022 were really low, and now they're really high. You have some people that are underwater where they kind of need to get a certain amount of number for their price. And same thing I work with buyers. I was talking to one yesterday where he ended up selling his house. He had over $100,000 in cash, and he started his own company. And he was like, I can't get a loan through a bank because I'm 1099 now. And I pretty much told him, I was like, we could go seller finance route. And he kind of knew about it, but a lot of other agents he talked to had no idea what they were doing. When you're looking, I mean, a lot of times when you're dealing with a seller finance on market, most of the time they're people that have done seller finance or are investors already, that have, I would say, a certain degree of knowledge. A lot of times when you're looking at single family homes and they're individuals, they have no idea what seller finance is. They're like, you want to buy it, go get a loan through the bank. Like, why are you coming to me? I have tried to talk to a lot of agents to try to do like loan assumptions or seller finance. A lot of times people will say no. You're seeing a lot more loan assumptions where pretty much if the person will qualify for their FHA or VA loan, they could take it over. I actually wrote a contract on one yesterday where pretty much my buyer would be the one. A lot of times they would have to live there. She was going to co-sign so her son could live there for a year, and then they could rent it out later. A lot of agents that were working through the 2008 crash, I think, were doing a little bit more seller financing and some loan assumptions, and they sometimes had some of their sellers get into some sticky water with someone who would take over their loan and then miss payments and destroy the house and things of that nature. So I've gotten that a lot of times where it's like, I would not ever, recommend my client going that route because of that added risk. So it completely depends, but I think for most single family homes, I mean, you do see a lot more loan assumptions where you would qualify, and then the seller finance ones are people that are a little more educated or are investors, and you can kind of usually find out, who those are just by talking to people.
Are those hard for you to present to your clients? Say you're trying to sell a home, right? You're representing a seller. I mean, honest opinion, are those kind of difficult for you to present to a seller, or do you feel like you present it just like any other offer that you would receive traditionally?
I would say it always depends on the situation. Typically, it is a difficult thing to pitch because most people, when they're selling their home, have to buy another home, because everyone has to live somewhere. So when somebody is doing something like that, a lot of times in their head, they see it a lot more easier where they have, maybe $200,000 so they can put that for their down payment of their next house, rather than seller financing that and have the person pay their mortgage for the difference. So a lot of times people have a difficult time wrapping their head around that because maybe it is an extra step or maybe a little bit more complicated for them to understand. They tend not to go that way. Now, if you need somebody who doesn't need the money or isn't going to buying another home with that, then you can get kind of into those circumstances. But like I said, most people that are selling are going to be, either upsizing, downsizing, or moving somewhere far away. And for those particular reasons, it's more difficult to pitch, I would say, seller financing to them.
Yeah, dude, it's super interesting that you say, and I've kind of seen this too, but you said like investors and more educated people are more open to seller finance, and like that's true because like I talk with a lot of, I've done a little bit of cold calling here and there, and always when I talk about seller financing, you're right. I mean, a lot of these homeowners are like, why would I do that? But like the actual investors, the savvy people who like know the tax benefits and they know like the pros of doing seller financing and creative finance, they're more open to it. Like I bought a house 6 months ago on seller financing, and this dude was like a land developer, pretty educated guy, and he like, he was open to it and he agreed to it, and it just, yeah, I kind of echo what you said. I mean, I guess it is more investors are more likely to seller finance. And I think you see that more in the commercial space and multifamily space, and as well as more in the business buying space. Like there's just a lot more creative finance going on in those spaces, like you said, because people are more educated. So that's just like super interesting kind of point I wanted to emphasize.
Yeah.
And I think it is something that is newer. I mean, even talking to my uncle who's been doing this probably for, over 50 years as an investor, asking him if he's ever done seller financing deals or what that's looked like. And he's like, why would a seller sell something on seller finance? He's like, is it not a good property or a deal that they would want to keep it? So it definitely is, I feel like, something that is becoming more popular. I mean, especially now with the raising interest rates. If you can get the seller where, maybe they're at 2 or 3%, or you get it where there's no interest rate, it's a lot more beneficial for, investors than paying all kinds of fees associated with interest.
Yeah, I was talking with another investor, and I guess in the 80s interest rates went up to like 15-18%, and so seller financing was like super common back in the 80s. So it's really not a new thing. Like it's been around for a long time. It's just it kind of comes and goes, like you said, depending on the market. So when the market shifts, or like when interest rates go up, seller financing and creative finance just becomes more common, because it's just kind of a better way to buy property, I guess. And like you said, there's not a lot of fees involved. So when I closed on this property, it was kind of cool because me and the seller, we actually only had to pay a few $100s to the title company to close everything out, and he gave me back the security deposits of the tenants. So my closing costs were actually negative. So I got like paid $1,500 to close on this house, which was super cool. It just hits more on the the benefits of doing creative finance. So Hunter, if you ever do come across sellers who need to sell their house and are too picky on price, send them my way.
Yeah. I mean, I do have somebody right now, but I think I have a client who might be buying it. The price he wants is a little high, but he was willing to sell or finance a townhome in Draper.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of large size down payments with those agreements? I would assume so.
Yeah, he did want a large size. I think he ultimately wanted like $50,000. The home was worth like 40 or 400,000, and he wanted like higher than the market right now, and without paying any realtor fees. Like his price was kind of out there. But for most people, I would say typically they do, unless maybe they have an interest only payment. So it depends how they set everything up. And honestly, that's kind of maybe a way to protect them. So if you do miss a payment or destroy the house, and they have to go back in and repair it or kind of take over the home again, they kind of have a built-in cushion of that, 10 or most of the time 20%, down payment that you gave them.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So Hunter, what are kind of your, as we start wrapping up, what are kind of your like aspirations in the next, like your 5-year plan right now, man? Like what is it that, like where you're at now and where you're wanting to be? Like what do you kind of see your realtor side of things going, like your business side of things going, and then also your investor side of things? Like where do you want those things to be in the upcoming years, and what are you doing right now to get them there?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. I mean, I definitely see myself within 5 years, I would say, spending a lot more time on the investor side rather than the realtor, I would say, agent side. Not to say that I won't still be doing that, but I definitely am wanting to buy a handful more properties, at least, one a year, kind of double it as I see it every single year. So, 2 the next year, 4 the next year, and 8 the year after that. Or get more into high end, because most of what I'm looking to do now is mostly off of midterm or short-term rental. So I can make a higher return on my investment, so I can, have 5 properties making me the exact same that, 15 or 20 would have, except it would be a lot more easy for me to, I think, manage 5 properties. And I kind of do like the idea of buying in different locations, more of like where I do love traveling. So buying stuff around, I would say, the country. So in other maybe like mountain or beach home or kind of a lake house, and then being able to get paid to own a home where I can go and live there for maybe a week or maybe a month in that time frame.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool, man.
That's great. Hunter, what advice would you give to someone who just wants to get started in real estate? Say like an 18-year-old kid just graduates high school, wants to do real estate.
I mean, I think the biggest thing for anyone that wants to get into real estate is call realtors. Most people are very scared to, I think, talk to a real estate agent, and the same thing, I feel like a lot of realtors are scared to talk to people. But realtors, that's what their job is to answer your questions and to educate you. So I think for somebody that's looking to get in, like, talk to a lender, talk to a realtor. You don't need to sign any paperwork, but you can kind of get knowledge, and then honestly just networking. And that's kind of the same thing. So just meeting as many people that are in the industry, and even if you're really trying to get involved, like, get a job, something that where you're working, about real estate, whether that's being an agent or maybe just being, maybe not a lender, but maybe even just doing the paperwork for like a real estate office, so you can kind of learn and then listen to people talking, because when you have people around you that are talking about something all day, you're naturally just going to know about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. What things are you doing right now to network?
I feel like the biggest ones, I mean, for myself right now, is honestly just working through, obviously most of my friends are realtors, so going to like certain events, I guess you could say, and trying to talk to other people, but more frequently I feel like is trying to network right now with a lot of the landlords at my college. So really been reaching out to a bunch of them, and they've been more than happy to give me their friends' information. So I'm kind of networking with a bunch of landlords at that college, so that when they are ready to sell, we just have one person who pitched pretty much a seller finance, like down payment, $0 for, I think it was like 14 homes for $6 million. And he pretty much told us, he's like, if I don't know what I'm going to do yet, I kind of want to look more into it, but I'm going to let you guys know what I decide, whether that's if I'm going to go with you or go another route.
That's exciting.
The reason he's telling us, and he's the only one that's told us he's going to sell, not anyone else. And that's solely just because of the relationships that you've built, which is more important than really anything else.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I think building relationships is a lot easier way to do real estate than cold calling and door knocking.
Definitely.
So that's good, man. That's awesome. Well, Hunter, we appreciate you being on, man. For all the listeners, where is the best place to find you, to follow you?
Yeah, you can probably go to my Instagram. I think it's Hunter Gibson's with an S at the end of it.
Awesome. Yeah.
Honestly, right now, though, I'm not too much on social media. I can't go on there and not lose track and scroll through something. So until I can get my everything else organized, I'll start working my social media a little bit more. But over the past year, it's mostly been a black everywhere for social media for me.
Well, let's get you to start producing content, man.
I wish I could. Every time I try to go post something, I'll spend an extra 10 or 20 minutes on there scrolling through something. And that's what gets to me. I need like almost a platform where I could post and not look at other people's stuff. I would be all in. But I don't know how to set that up as of right now.
I agree, and kind of not to go on a tangent, but something that I've done recently is I deleted Instagram and Facebook on my cell phone, and I just have it on my computer. So like my computer is where I do work. So like I access Instagram and Facebook from my computer. So my mind is like, okay, I'm only doing this for work and not to like consume things. And I think that's
actually a great idea. I'll have to give that a try.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hunter, thanks for being on here, man. Dude, a lot of good content, knowledge that you shared with us, and look forward to being in touch with you throughout your career and ours. And man, just really appreciate you being on here.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
See ya.
We'll see you.